Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these elegant diamonds wirework bracelets. And these are the two that I've made here with different materials just to show you the different looks that you can get. So this is the effect. So you have kind of just base wires running all the way along, but then we weave these different sized diamonds, and then I've added beads in along the edge. You can see there I'm using rounds, but here I'm actually using bicones. So this is then what the copper version looks like on. So you can see it's quite a bit more bold and colourful. That adds to the wrist there. But then the other one looks like this. So this is far more elegant, I think, and especially obviously adding in those bicones. I even think it's a little bit bridal looking. You just get that nice effect of those diamonds. So whichever direction you choose to go in with yours, I would love to see your finished result. In fact, anything you've made from my tutorials at any point, I would love to see that. So what you can do is, if you have Instagram, you can always tag me on there. The link to mine is going to be down in the description box there. But if you want to learn how to make these now, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to be needing. First of all, here I have 3 different gauges of regular round copper wire. The first one is a 1mm, so this is going to be a base wire because it's the thickest gauge. And then this is a 0.8mm. This is also going to be a base wire, but for a bit of a different reason. And then finally here I have a 0.4mm, which is going to be the weaving wire. And then for the beads, I'm using these 3mm rounds. These specific ones are blue coated hematite. That's just what I chose. I thought it went nicely with the copper wire there. And then to finish it off, I'm using these ribbon ends where I'm then going to attach my lobster claw clasp extended chain with the jump rings. So let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So then the lengths of wires that we're going to need here is, first of all, 3 lengths of the 1mm gauge of about 25 centimeters each. So like I said, these are base wires and they're the thickest ones. And then we need 2 lengths of the 0.8mm also of 25 centimeters, and these are also going to be base wires. And then we need 2 lengths of the 0.4mm here of about 1 meter and 20 centimeters each, and these are going to be weaving wires. And finally, another length of the 0.4mm wire here of about 2 meters, and this is also a weaving wire. So first I'm going to get my 0.8mm wires ready here, and then also 2 lengths of the 0.4mm, so these are the shorter lengths. And then what we need to do is prepare all of these wires together. And first I take 1 length here of the base wire to work with, and then also 1 length of the weaving wire. So what I'm going to do is work towards one end of both of them, and then put the weaving wire there and leave a short tail to be able to hold on to behind the base wire. So just like that. And then I'm going to just start coiling this around the base wire just to be able to attach it. So just coil it around a few times, just like that here. And then I'm just going to grab some chain nose pliers and just push the wraps together so they're nice and tight. So that's now this one weaving wire attached to one of the base wires. And then I grab the other base wire of the 0.8mm and the other length of the 0.4mm wire that we're using, and then we need to attach them as well in the same way. But what I'm going to do is, instead of putting it behind, I'm going to put it on top. So the weaving wire on top of the base wire there, and then hold on to the little tail, and then start wrapping it around. So what happens now is the weaving wire is going around the base wire, but in the opposite direction to the first one that we just did. And again, just wrap this around a few times so then it's attached. So then we take the other 3 base wires, and these are the 3 lengths of the 1mm thickness, and then the longest length of the 0.4mm of the weaving wire. So then we take the 3 lengths of the 1mm base wire that we cut ready, and then the last length of the 0.4mm, so the longest one that we have. And then we need to also start putting these together. So what that means is, this is basically starting out the pattern. So again, I'm going to put my weaving wire with a short tail behind the base wire towards one end, and then I'm going to wrap this around the base wire twice, just like that, and make sure to squeeze them together so the wraps become nice and tight, just like that. And then I'm going to bring in the other base wires. So I'm going to lay one above the first base wire on top of the weaving wire, like that. And then I'm going to lay the other one below the first base wire. So that first one that we wrapped the wire around ends up in the middle. and just lay them flat next to each other, just like that. Make them even on the ends, and then hold on to this. So we now take the weaving wire, it's coming down behind. I'm going to take it across the top of all of the base wires there, and then back around the back to come down behind them all. Now make sure when you wrap like this around all of them that you don't pull too tight on the base wire, because that's going to, on the weaving wire, sorry, because that's going to pull the base wires close together, which we don't want, because we need to make sure we have space between the base wires for the weaving wires still. Then go around over the top of all of them once more and down behind, and I like to kind of press the wraps down with my fingers as well as I go. And then it's coming down behind, but we now need to come up between the bottom two base wires so we can wrap around the middle one again by itself, just like we did as the first few wraps. So just separate out the wires a little bit. It's a little bit fiddly in the beginning here, but once the wires get kind of fastened together properly, it's going to get easier to hold and manage. So down between the top two to wrap around that, up in the same place so we can wrap around that middle wire by itself, just like that. And what I again just like to do is get my chain nose pliers and push my wraps close together. You can also, as you go, push down on top here so you kind of flatten down the weave a bit, just like that. So there we now have this started out. Now before we start putting all the wires together here, I'm just going to grab the 0.8mm links again where I attached the single wire, the weaving wire, and what I just want to do is add a bead to each of these, because they're just going to help with the spacing a bit as well, before we weave them all together, and just let it drop all the way down right after the wraps that we've done. And then we need to kind of fasten this in place, so I'm going to take the weaving wire as coming behind the base wire and just bring it across the back of the bead. Make sure the bead is pushed all the way down tight against the wraps that we've already done, like that, and then bring it to the other side there, where we then wrap 3 times. So the first one was 1, and then 2, and then 3. So that's now trapped that bead in place. You can just push them close to make sure it sits nicely against the wraps, and do that with the other one as well. But obviously we're just wrapping the wire in the opposite direction. So then I take my wires here where I just made the first little diamond, and then we need to start putting all this together. And then take the length, my first length here, of the 0.8mm where I added a bead onto it, and the one where I wrapped around with the tail being under to begin with, that needs to go on top of all these, so above them. And then the other one here where we started out wrapping from above, that needs to go below all of them. So they're going to sit on the outer edge just like this, and just adjust them here on the end. And then what we need to do is have these beads sitting just a short little while after that very first diamond. We can still adjust this, but just to kind of get the rough idea for now. And then I'm just going to hold on to this, and like I said, it's still the beginning, it's still all kind of loose, so it's going to be a little bit fiddly. Just separating out the base wires a little bit, because then what we need to do is you can just make sure to take the weaving wires that belong to those 0.8mm lengths of the base wires. You can kind of just put them out to each their own side, and then we just need to get back to the middle weaving wire where we made that first diamond. So we now need to start making the second diamond, which is going to be a larger one, and also how we're going to connect all these base wires together. So to start it out, we need to go up below the middle base wire there, so the 0.1mm. And then what we need to do is, what you're going to have is a section of this weaving wire just running behind the base wires. So kind of just coming across like that. Move that out of the way at an angle, and then kind of just make sure to stop it. So I like to kind of put my finger behind it a little bit, and then just push these wraps down with the beads on the sides, and then make sure that the weaving wire here in the middle comes up just a little bit at the end of the beads. and then we need to go down above the middle base wire. So we're just wrapping around that by itself again, and then we need to wrap around that once more. So just starting out the exact same way that we started the other diamond. Now when you then wrap these, don't push too hard on these wraps, because it's going to push this wrap and these wraps closer to the other diamond, which we don't want. We want that space in between them. So what I like to do is, because you can see they're not really close now, but I do want these wraps to be close. So what I'm going to do is take my chain nose and make sure to push them together using the chain nose pliers instead of pushing them close, because that way they stay in the place where I want them to on the base wire. So just like that. And then we need to make the next step in the diamond, which is the same. So we need to wrap around the 3 middle base wires, which are the 3 1mm ones. And again, it's more helpful here to use the chain nose pliers to help push your weaving wire wherever you want it to go, and kind of push your wraps nice and close together. And then go over the top of the 3 middle base wires. So I'll come down between the top 2 there, push that down, and then do that once more. So come down behind to go over the top of the same 3. So like that, and then again it's coming down behind, and I just like to push this down a bit. And now comes the time where we need to fasten all this better together. So it's going to be easier to manage as well. Just separate out the base wires a bit again, because the reason that we also need the beads in there is to help with the spacing, like I said. Because otherwise what would happen is there wouldn't be enough space to add the beads if we don't do that from the beginning here. So just get them into position, and then what we need is, again, I'm just leaving the weaving wires from the base wires on the edge where we wrap the beads in place, leaving them out for now. I'm still just working with this middle base wire, but I then need to come down behind all of them, make sure the beads are sitting close to the other base wires there, so they're basically buttoned up against each other. Hold on to that, and then go around the bottom one, and you want to then come around just after the last wrap on the outer base wire that's coming after the bead. Go over the top of all of the base wires to come down behind again, and again that's then wrapping around the top base wire just after the wraps we've done with the other weaving wire on the top, and then push that down with your fingers to lay flat against the base wires, and then come down behind again to go over the top once more. Again, when you're doing this, it's crucial as well to not pull too tight on the weaving wire here, because what's then going to happen is, if I just pull a bit tight here, you can see the base wires would want to come closer together, and obviously that would kind of compromise being able to then add in the beads. So just like that. So another thing you could also do to help you with that is actually add another bead to each of the outer base wires. So again, just the same one, because we're going to keep adding more in anyway. So whether you wait or whether you do it now, it doesn't really matter, other than if you do it now, you can help use them to judge the distance there. So instead of just kind of not pulling too tight so they don't get pulled in together, the base wires there, you can actually use the bead, push it down a fair bit so it sits next to there, and then that will naturally make sure that the wire won't really get pulled in close together. Obviously still don't pull too tight, but it just really does help to add in those beads. So now we've done that middle wrap, so that's the very, you could call it point of the diamond, the furthest wrap that we're going to do. I then need to come up between the bottom 2 to be able to do the second ones again. So go over the middle 3 base wires, and then like I said, you can add these beads in or not. Right now we're not using them just yet, so they could be a bit in the way, so you could always take them back off to add them again, or you could just leave them on and make sure you bring the weaving wire here in between them, like that. Again, we're in the middle, so still make sure we're not pulling too tight, because these base wires in the middle there, we need to have enough space between them to get the weaving wire in. And just press your wrap down whenever you've done it, and then bring it up again to wrap over the same 3 one more time, just like that. come down behind, so we can then come up underneath the middle base wire to just wrap around that by itself, just like how we started the diamond out. So that's how we're going to start and finish all the diamonds, is that double wraps basically around the middle base wire. So like that, and again come up to then wrap around that middle one once more, so it becomes twice. And then, like I always like to then do, take my chain nose pliers and help push these wraps close together, because like I said, it can be hard to do while we're wrapping, because we want to make sure we don't push things where we don't want them to go. So just like this, and as you can see, you can still kind of move everything around, but that doesn't really matter too much for now, in the sense if it does move around, just move it back to where you want it to sit. So something like this. And then we need to move on to the next step, which is to wrap around the outer edges again. So those 0.8mm base wires. So grab hold of that and then just start on one side, it doesn't really matter which one. Make sure that that large diamond that we just made is right up against the wraps on the outer edge with the other weaving wires. Because then what we need to do is bring these weaving wires to the other side of that diamond. So I'm just going to bring them behind the tops there of that wrap, basically just how we added in the bead, the exact same way, and then just come up underneath that top base wire, and then we're just wrapping on the other side of it. So that's once, and again, like I said, you can take the bead off if it's in your way, or just get around it, and twice, and then once more. So basically the same amount of times as we did just before the large diamond, just like that. And then what we need to do is trap in this next bead. So we just had to do a few more wraps there with the bead loose. So I'm going to push it all the way down, make sure to kind of hold on to it there with my finger so it stays against those wraps. Bring the same weaving wire behind the bead to then come to the other side of the bead and keep wrapping just like that. You can see it traps it in place. And then what I'm going to do here is actually do 8 wraps after the bead. And now the top one is in place waiting for the next step. We then need to move to the bottom there and do the same. So just first of all, the weaving wire is coming out before that wrap across all the base wires with the middle weaving wire. And remember, this is going in the opposite direction. Just bring it around the back of that, them wraps there that we did right at the tip, and then start wrapping on the other side. And again, do this 3 times to match the other side. And then obviously get to this point here just before we then need to add in the bead on this base wire. So it's already added, so I'm just going to push it all the way down there, and then make sure I hold it in place right up against the wraps that we just did. Bring the wire behind to then come up on the other side and wrap around there. So just like the other side, we need the same amount of wraps, so do this 8 times so your weaving wire on this side ends up in the same place as the opposite side. So once we're at this point here, we need to then move on to the middle weaving wire again, around those middle base wires. So I'm just leaving the outer ones on the edge out to the side, and then I'm grabbing the middle one, and we need to then make the next small diamond, just like the very first one that we did. So what I'm going to do is grab that, and then come up underneath the middle base wire, like that. But then again, we just need to get the spacing right. So I'm just putting my finger there behind everything, kind of to brace that weaving wire a little bit, make sure it stays in place where I want it to sit, and then make sure you don't pull this out. We need this to basically start wrapping just after these beads that we added in. So then come down above the middle base wire, and then we have that wrap more or less in place. And then, because the first one is always a little bit crooked, you can always use your chain nose to help straighten it up a bit, and something like that. And then come up again in the same place as before to wrap around the same one one more time. But again, remember to be careful to not push down with the wraps here with the weaving wire too much, because that'll just push it closer towards the previous diamond, where we want it to stay where it is now. So just push the wraps together with your chain nose, just gently, and then go behind and come up between the bottom 2 base wires to then wrap across the 3 middle base wires there, so the 3 1mm ones, the exact same way that we did the first diamond, so the small one. Just lay it across there, push it down so you're happy with how it looks. Bring it behind and come up between the bottom 2 again. Lay across the top 3, or the middle 3 across the top there. Just push them nice and close together and flatten them out. And then we need to finish this little diamond off by wrapping around the middle base wire again. So just on the other side of these double wraps. So just like that, come down so we can wrap around that middle one. And again, do that twice. So just like that, and then just like all the other times, to push it close together, I use the chain nose pliers. So we get the feel of that diamond there, the small one of the diamonds, just like that. So that's now in place there. So you can see we then have, just get the base wires organized a little bit. We then have a small diamond that we started out with, then a larger diamond, and then a small one. And you can kind of start to see the effect now, how things are going to be sitting as well next to each other. So then we're ready to add the next 2 beads in. So again, they go on the outer ones. So just add them onto the wire and let them drop down all the way right after the last wraps that you did. So they're going to sit there, and then we obviously need to kind of lock them in place like before. So I'm just going to do that just like before by holding it close to the wraps, and then wrap that weaving wire that belongs to that base wire around the back of it and up the other side. And then on here again, do it 3 times, because now we're moving towards the point we need to make the large diamond again. So we're alternating between the large and the small one, and we've reached the kind of large one again. So we need to get all the wires into position to be able to make that. And obviously the same with the bottom one. Make sure you don't take the middle weaving wire, but you stick with the ones that kind of belong to the base wires. Hold on to it. Get the weaving wire behind the bead, to then come up on the other side and wrap 3 times again. Just like this. Make sure your wraps are nice and close together. So we now have these beads added in as well. And then we basically have all our wires ready for making this next large diamond right there in the middle. So then we just start out like all the other times when making a diamond there. We just take the middle weaving wire again, come up below the middle base wire, and then just get the spacing right. So to start the next one, I'm going to start just before this last beads that we added in, before they end. Something like that, and then bring it across the top of that middle base wire to come down between the 2 wires, to then be able to wrap around this again by itself. So we're starting with those 2 wraps around that middle base wire. It's the beginning of all the diamonds. And again, just make sure to push this nice and close before we move on. So we have a nice starting point here, and we'll get the effect of those diamonds. So something like that, and then wrap around over the top of all 3 of the middle base wires. Something like that. Come down behind them all, and as I do that, I like to kind of push it down, like I said, to make sure I don't have it too loose or too tight. Come up and do that one more time. Just like that. And then it's time to wrap around all of them over the top of, but before I do that, I just again like to make sure I squeeze everything tight just so I know everything sits in the place I want it to. Just need to do that one a little bit more. And I just like to keep repeating this throughout. Keep using my chain nose pliers to do that. So then what you can see now is where these wraps have ended up fits pretty much perfectly with the next wrap we're going to do across all of them. It's going to be right next to the wraps, the last ones that we have on the outside edges there. So I'm going to take the middle one, come down behind all of them, around the bottom one, and over the top of all of them. Just like that. And again, this is the point where, if you want to, you can add in some more beads on these outer wires just to help with the spacing so we don't get them too tight. And then they're also ready for the next beads that we have to add in anyway. So just bring them down here towards where we're wrapping on both of the outside wires. So like that. And then, like I said, we can use them for spacing, so make sure we don't get too tight with it. And then come around the top of all the base wires, around the back, and then back around the top of them again. To do the second one, make sure they lie close right next to each other. And then we need to do the wrap around the middle three again. So just over the top of them. Again, just get the bead out of the way while we're doing that. Bring it down behind. And still make sure you keep the distance between those middle base wires as well. And once more. And make sure you flatten it out. To then come up so we can wrap around the middle one by itself. And kind of finish this diamond off again. So just separate out the middle base wire and go around that. You can see I can push that down to kind of finish it off nicely. So just like that. Again, use your chain nose pliers, and also, like I said, throughout, if you need to, if you feel like it will help push this down flat. It's going to help make things kind of sit nice and neat and next to each other as well. Because what we want to make sure to do is that all of these wraps end up sitting next to each other, not kind of overlapping over onto each other at any point. So I can see these, I just gotta push a little bit closer together, get them in place. Otherwise just flatten it out there. And then you have the large diamond in place. Just bring that out a little bit so I can push them together like that. But then that's a large diamond, and then once you're happy with that, we need to obviously fasten in these next beads. So that's where we then get to the outside ones again, outside weaving wires. So we just go behind the tip of the diamonds there on either side, do the 3 wraps, then cage in the beads, and then just continue with the same pattern here, because this is then where we need to move to the next small diamond where we have more wraps in between the beads all in one row there. So you just keep going like this. This is the pattern until you have the length that you need. So this is then what it looks like there. You can see we have those diamonds, both the larger and the smaller ones, alternating, and then spaced out with the beads all the way along the edges, so they're nice and even. And then what we have left to do now is finish off the ends. So obviously the ends are the base wires, but also we just need to get rid of the excess weaving wire there. So for that, I'm just getting out a pair of flush cutters here, so we can cut off the excess nicely. And what I've just made sure to do as well is right on the ends, on the actual edges on both sides there, I've just wrapped a few extra times with the weaving wire, just so we get it a bit further up. And then on the inside there, we just finish on that last diamond. So we're going to finish them all off in the same way. So all I'm going to do, I have them all coming out towards the back. And then I'm going to cut off the excess, just so there's a tiny little tail left, like that. And then I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, and you can see that little end. We need to make sure we squeeze that down. And then basically when I'm wrapping this around, by squeezing it, make sure it wraps around in the direction that it's already going, so the actual end of the wire ends up in between the base wires there. And just keep going until it's completely gone, so you don't have that end sticking out. And also just make sure to run your finger over it so you can't feel it, so it's nice and smooth there. So just finish all of them off in that way. And then we need to finish off the base wires as well. So I'm going to just get a pair of flush cutters out again, and I'm just going to start cutting down the lengths of those 3 base wires in the middle, so the 1mm ones. And what I'm going to do is, we need to leave enough length though, but also not too long. So what can help is measure against the ribbon ends that we're going to add and just see where they're going to sit, but then obviously we need to cut them down so they're not longer than the depth there of the ribbon ends, but also a bit shorter than that actually. So I need to cut them just a little bit above where I finished those wraps on the side, and then just start with one at a time there. Cut that off, and then take the other 2 in the middle, just cut them to the same level, so something like that. You can see we now have them cut off right there in the middle. And then what we need to do is manage the outer ones. They're the 0.8mm. So I'm going to get my chain nose pliers, because what we need to do is put a bend into them. So I'm just going to take one at a time and then basically place my pliers just above where we cut off those wires in the middle. Then I'm going to put my pliers on, and then we need to bend this inwards. So basically put a corner in there, so that this wire comes across the middle there, but straight after the ends of the wires that we cut off to begin with. And then go to the other side and do the exact same thing in the same place. So grab onto the wire in the right place there, just gotta find it, and then bend it inwards so it comes straight across right in the ends of the other wires. So we now have that, and then what we need to do is cut off the excess of them. So just one at a time, I'm going to start with the front one here, cut it off right in the middle. So just one at a time, so something like there. Cut the excess off, go to the other one, so just flip it there, and then cut that. So once you cut it, the ends of these 2 wires meet up like that basically. So almost butt against each other, but just nice and close. Just find that there's a little gap, something like that. You can see they kind of then frame the ends of the other wires nicely. And that's now all the wires ready and cut off to the length that we need. Now to add to the ribbon end here, I'm going to use a bit of glue just to give it extra security and longevity. So I'm using the E6000 because it dries clear and it's really strong as well, and it works really well with metal. So I'm just going to get a little bit out on a toothpick. Don't need too much. This is probably a bit too much. I can always wipe some of it away. And then I need to get that inside of my ribbon end. So up and down the sides there, make sure to cover them. And then whatever I have left, just make sure, take a little bit out because it was a bit too much. Then I like to add a bit to the very end of the bracelet as well, so that once we put them together, they're going to adhere nicely. So like that, because then you can make sure to get it right down in between the wires, so that when it dries, obviously when we put it together, it's going to make it really secure. So just a little something like that, wipe off the excess, and then place your ribbon end here onto the end of the bracelet, just like that. Make sure it sits in the middle. I'm going to then take some flat nose pliers, because right now it's open, so we need to clamp this down. So I like to hold my piece in my hand and then put a finger on either side of the ribbon end, just to kind of hold it in place, because when we clamp this down it can move around a little bit. So I like to go in one place and then do gentle push and move from side to side and gently squeeze it more and more together. As you can see, you can kind of move around while we're doing this. So what I do before I clamp it down all the way I just take my fingers off and double check it, make it sit where I want it to sit, so as much in the middle as possible, and then you can go in and do your final squeeze. So put a bit of force into it so it's really going to stay where you want it to. And I was going from the side just to close up the sides there. And then obviously it's a matter of letting that glue dry. And then you can use that loop up there to just attach your findings. So that's how you finish off the end. Do the same thing with the other end. Once the glue is dry, attach your findings. And then all we got to do is shape it. So then to shape the bracelet into the final shape, you can either push it around something that has the size and shape that you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel or something else, or you can just use your hands and fingers. So I'm just going to be doing that. So what I do is I go into one place and then start putting a curve into it. So I don't go into one place on the bracelet and put a big bend because that'll make it out of shape. You can see here I'm just going to work my way from one side and then working back again, and gradually put in more and more of a curve. So I'm just going to continue to work my way back and forth like this, putting this curve into it, always making sure the back of the bracelet is towards the inside there and the front is out away from the piece. So it's going to be facing outward when we're wearing it. And then we just need to make sure we keep doing this, adding the curve in, so these two ends are going to end up meeting up and we get the full shape that we want. So now I have my final shape and it looks like this. So we now have the finished bracelet. You can see you get that really nice effect of those different sized diamonds going all the way along just because of the weaving, and then obviously the extra colour added in with the beads on the edge. And this is one version, and then the other one I did here as well. So also depending what materials you use, you can see you can get really different results. But then I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.